Welcome back everybody. Today we're going to have a quick look through the owner's manual that we get with the Recruit edition, and it's very similar to the one that's in the Command edition apparently, except for a few bits and pieces such as the data cards that you get. They're model specific, and believe it or not, there's some instructions on the inside that tell you how to put these little guys together, which is absolutely fantastic. But let's just take a moment to have a look at this thing and appreciate the quality of it. Coming from a background of getting little plastic models that get a what would be butcher's paper effort printed on for information and instructions on how to assemble everything, this is a pretty nice document. Glossy pages, well put together, colored print, lots of detail, and full instructions on what to do with the hobby, which is absolutely fantastic. A lot of details into what you can do working with the gaming side of things, which obviously that's the plan in this instance. Then they go into some of the lore, which is really nice. It's such a detailed and rich history, fantastic map, you are here, that sort of thing. And looking forward to actually reading up on some of the other documentation that you can purchase for these to get more information on how it all works. But there's certainly plenty in this just little introductory book to get your teeth stuck into it and get a feel for what's going on. It all looks very nice, it's very enticing, it's done well. Their marketing team needs to get a pat on the back. Now we can see we've got some assembly instructions, which is great. They'll come in handy because there's lots of little details and we need to make sure we're putting them together. This particular kit uses press fit, so there's no need for glue apparently, so all that glue I rushed out and got was probably a bit preemptive, but I'm expecting to use it further down the track. But I will look forward to assembling these guys. We may use a little bit of adhesive here and there. They've got some really nice models in this as well apparently, and it'll be great to see them all assembled. We will eventually get to the painting. Last week's vid was on me trying to actually learn how to use an airbrush. Still have to play with the paint brushes, and that will be another exercise in itself. But the book itself has a lot of great information, tells you how to play the game, gives you different scenarios, and lots of promotional photos to get your palette wet with respect to all the primary color guys that you can play with if you're so inclined to collect the entire set. And there's plenty out there to keep you busy, and apparently it changes year on year, so that's going to get entertaining. Certainly if you've got an addictive personality and you like to collect everything because you're a completionist, you could be in for a very unhealthy bank balance. But it's great to see that they've got some info in there with regards to what to do next, where to go, and they give you some more information, more data cards for some of the characters that you don't actually get. But I'm guessing that's a bit of a kick in the backside to say, hey, this is what you need to do next. Speaking of next, let's actually have a look at the contents now. This is the Command edition, not the Recruit edition. It has the terrain, and we're just having a bit of a close look here at the details, which is actually quite phenomenal really. There's lots of dials, gauges, and skulls. There's always skulls, nuts and bolts, bent vents, broken off piping, cables, and lots of wall sections that look heavily damaged, twisted, warped, floor platforms. It's really quite amazing and heavy too. Didn't realize just how heavy this stuff would be, but it's looking like it should be quite fun to work with. Now we've got two tools of the trade. I've got some side cutters that are a little bit more heavy duty than the cutters that they suggest you use, because the sprues look pretty chunky, and I'm figuring that might be the best approach for some of the thicker stuff. This is the first piece of Warhammer kit that I've ever actually played with here, so this is a bit of a first. So we're having a bit of a shot at taking that off the sprue. Now this has all been sped up because apparently I'm laboriously slow at this. Now it could have something to do with being an old fart and taking my sweet time about everything, not being in a rush. Either that or it's OCD, and I'm just a little bit too pedantic about how I approach everything. So everything is think twice, cut once kind of approach to the project. And and we're just systematically going around and trying to segregate the panels off of the sprue. So some of them are actually connected on sort of tapered angles, so you've just got to make sure you align it upright. It would actually have been nice if the cutters had a pointed nose. They're actually slightly squared off, and so they actually squish the end. So it's not like a pair of scissors perhaps, and you just have to take that into account when you're using them. Obviously the idea is to put them flush against the plastic, but the base here on the thicker sprue, well, that was a little bit of a complication, and had a bit of a sort of workaround trying to figure the best approach to separate that. Some of the finer pieces clearly lend themselves to using the smaller cutters, but the big chunky bits looked a little bit too large, and I was a bit concerned that I might crush the plastic rather than cutting it because of the girth of the connection. When I tried squeezing, I could see, well, the whole thing's puckering. So I thought, I'm not a big fan of maybe doing that. There might be a better alternative. So on hindsight, I decided what we can do is actually take the sprue off by cutting it further up away from the plastic model, just to protect, because I know it's a base, but let's just say I want to be a bit more overprotective. So grab the big suckers, get it down into bite-sized pieces, and then separate each individual piece by cutting a little bit up from the edge of the model, so that the thing separates cleanly, leaving a tab behind, which then is easier to attack with the right angle. So just cutting through all the pieces there with the large cutters makes the job pretty quick, and didn't get completely through, but that's okay. You can always go back and have another little attack at it. But you can see there's a fair bit left on the model itself, and I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to damage the plastic. Didn't know quite how it was going to perform, so better safe than sorry. Obviously this is a learning curve, and it might be absolutely tedious for some, and they can get through it and just chip everything off really quickly. But yeah, attention to detail, just wanted to be cautious, and then I was able to go back in and just progressively take off the little tabs that were left, and then follow up once I'd got those off by just cleaning up with the hobby knife, just to shave it off and make it completely smooth. You can see there are some mold lines there, but I figured they're probably not so crucial on something that is a wall section, particularly on the base where you can't really see it. So I'm not too concerned about that. But we just shaved everything off with the hobby knife just to smooth it off so that it sits flush and doesn't rock around. Not too complicated. Knife is sharp enough to smooth that off, so it gives a pretty good finish. So pretty happy with sort of how this section's come out, and then it's just a matter of obviously moving on to all the other bits and pieces, and making sure you haven't left anything, because occasionally there's little bits hanging off that you didn't even realize, like that one there. So we just remove that and clean it up, and just when you thought you'd finished, you go, oh, what about the big fat circle in the middle? That clearly isn't part of the original design, so we have to go back and complete the rest of that. So we almost got done, and then we had to fiddle around with that, and that was a little bit of a slow process. Tried cutting it off first, but because it's such a rigid piece of plastic, wasn't overly keen on just chomping into it, because there's nowhere for the plastic to deflect, because you're not actually cutting, you're squashing. So I resorted to the hobby knife to actually slice or carve through the plastic, because it doesn't take up much space, just so I could get a little bit of leeway before I then started to clip away the rest of the connections. So yeah, this was a bit of a learning curve. Whether this needs to be so precise, probably not at the end of the day, considering that there's actually a disc that you push in there and you'll probably never see the connections anyway. But again, just OCD. So we just systematically went through there and shaved away and clipped. And just remember, this is double the speed, so yes, I'm not that fast, but yes, it would have taken an inordinate amount of time to get completed otherwise. So once we'd actually got somewhere, we were able to then start snipping away a little bit more, and get a reasonable finish on the job. It's surprising just how long this process seems to take. Not really aware of how much time you're physically burning through, but you're not really clock watching. In fact, it's a bit of a panacea for modern day expediency, everyone running around, urgency at work, whatever. And so it's nice to just kick back and just enjoy the hobby. Obviously, this is the construction phase. Not everyone might be so enthusiastic about constructing. They might want that instant gratification of, where's my model? I want to see it. I want to play with it. And yeah, a little bit of self-restraint goes a long way, I guess, if you've got the capacity to just plod laboriously through the project, but actually find it enjoyable and calming, which it seems to be, as long as you obviously don't slice your arm off accidentally or break anything. And this brings us happily to the end of the first piece of Warhammer. There it is. Woohoo! And now what we need to do is actually fit the disc. And I haven't actually consulted the book of armaments at all to get the instructions on how this is done. So I just grab the disc, circular bit goes into circular hole. That seems somewhat self-explanatory. It is double-sided though. So we thought, oh, well, let's try this side and line it up. There appears to be some pipes that sort of do align with some of the elements, and it sort of looks okay from the back. Cool, that's not so bad, but yeah, let's push in, no commitment. Let's try it the other way round. And so just pop that in. It fits obviously. Similarly, there's a lot of pipe work that seems to run to that point. It looks like it's okay, but it looks a bit pokey-outy on this side. Seems to work better with the more projecting part of the wall, given that it's so proud of the background. So, yep, happy with that. And we're done. Woohoo! That's fantastic. Okay, now that we've got all the bits and pieces out of the sprue, we can Benny Hill them together so that you can see what they actually look like assembled. There appears to be a key sort of system for pushing them together. Again, no glue required, so just use a bit of exertive force to squish them piece to piece, and a little bit of fine adjustment to try and reduce as much as possible the gaps that have formed between the two pieces. So just a little bit of wiggling backwards and forwards tends to do a reasonable job of that. And then once you've got that assembled, it's a matter of putting in the floor. That works out pretty straightforward in that it's the flat straight edges get pushed into the recess at the top of the wall, and voila, we have what looks like a first floor or part thereof. If we have a look at it now in its entirety, it looks quite good from that angle. Obviously they're not intending anyone to jam their head underneath and have a look around, because the underside of the floor is not complete. The smaller piece goes together a little bit easier. Clearly there's only one section that needs to be pushed together, so that's relatively straightforward and simple. Sprue 2 is an action replay of the other piece. Again, just socketing them together with a bit of wiggly effort to try and get them to close up as best as possible. And in this instance here, there's actually two sections to the roof, so you don't necessarily have to use both because there is a separation between them. So you can choose to put one in or both. It's at your discretion. Obviously, they just push in. You have the option of making it permanent by gluing things, and I haven't decided whether I will glue it or not. Clearly, if you wanted to pack things away, you can make them quite flat and store them a lot easier if that's the case. You might end up with a little bit of a seam once you've painted everything, if it adds or pushes together all the time. I don't know. Also, with once everything is together, you have a close look at the sections. We can clearly see there's an obvious join running between the pieces, and whether or not that should be filled with putty or something. Obviously, if you did that, you would be permanently gluing it. I don't know if you'd be taking those apart on a regular basis. Suggestions would be a great idea if anyone's built one of these and they have played with them, what their thoughts are on the matter, because clearly you can see daylight through them and it does look a little bit distracting. Takes away from the realism slightly. So any words on that would be beneficial. So that brings us to the stunning completion of another exciting episode of Almost As Bad As Watching Paint Dry the last time. We still have a couple of pieces of terrain to complete, most of the pipes and the other components, but we'll get those done, and then we've got quite a lot of characters to start building, so that's going to take a little bit of time. We'll try and not do it piece by piece. That's going to get a little bit tedious, clearly, and hopefully we can bring some excitement and enthusiasm and start painting, slapping some onto these little chaps and bringing some colour in and maybe getting to use them at some point. But it's a slow and steady process as we learn our way through this. So I thank you for your patience, and thanks for getting this far if you did, and hopefully we can continue on this journey together. Thank you kindly.